Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the McGill Institute for the Study of Canada's 2016 conference, Canada on the Global Stage, Exploring Canada's Image and Role in the World. My name is Will Straw, and I am the director of the Institute. Bon après-midi à vous tous. Bienvenue à la conférence annuelle de l'Institut d'études canadiennes de McGill, le Canada à l'échelle mondiale. Je suis Will Straw, directeur de l'Institut. I would like to acknowledge that McGill University is located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. McGill honors and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we meet today. Now, I've presided over 6 annual conferences at MISC, the first as interim director, the past 5 as director of the Institute. It's a yearly highlight that has brought together fascinating minds, generated thought-inspiring discussions, and I should say many sleepless nights. This will be my last conference, and I believe, and I'm sure that it will be every bit as enlightening as the predecessors. So I would like now to acknowledge, first of all, the presence here of Principal Suzanne Fortier, Chancellor Emerita Greta Chambers, McGill Institute for the Study of Canada board co-chairs Anne Dadson and Michael Goldblum, as well as several other dedicated members of the MISC board. And I'd like to thank all of our speakers, moderators, and keynote presenters who have taken time out of their busy schedules to be with us today and tomorrow. Luckily, for the first time, I think, in my tenure as director, we've not had a huge snowstorm on the first day of the conference, although I gather there's an accident on Sherbrooke Street which is holding some people up. I'd also like to take a moment to thank, for his support to the conference, Montreal Mayor Denis Coderre, who unfortunately could not join us today. I'd like to remind you that there is a coat check, and you are welcome and encouraged to use it. J'aimerais rappeler aux gens que ceci est un événement bilingue et vous êtes libre de vous exprimer dans la langue de votre choix. I'd like to ask you to please turn off your cell phones or to put them on vibration mode. And I think for now, those are the reminders. I would now like to introduce Principal Suzanne Fortier of McGill University. Suzanne Fortier assume les fonctions de principale et vice-chancelière de l'Université McGill depuis septembre 2013. Prior to her appointment as principal, Professor Fortier was president of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Council of Canada, known as NSERC, and held the position of vice principal academic and vice principal research at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, where she was a professor in the Department of Chemistry and in the School of Computing. A McGill grad, Princess Fortier has received numerous awards. Elle est officier de l'Ordre national du mérite de France, membre de l'Association américaine pour l'avancement des sciences et membre à titre spécial de la Société royale du Canada. Alors, I invite Principal Fortier to say some opening words.
Merci, c'est vraiment un plaisir d'être ici. J'aimerais vous souhaiter la bienvenue. Vous remercier aussi de participer à cette conférence annuelle dont le thème « Le Canada à l'échelle mondiale » est particulièrement important. Je pense qu'on est tous observateurs d'un monde où les enjeux internationaux se développent à une vitesse très rapide et avec des impacts aussi très importants. So this is a good time for us to talk about Canada's place in the world, but also, and I think more importantly, Canada's role in the world. I think some of you know that I had an incredible lens on the place of Canada in the world, where I attended at the beginning of the year the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, and to see the presence of many Canadians, including, of course, our Prime Minister and several ministers of our country at the conference, and their engagement in the conference gave me a very exciting perspective of the kind of role that our country can play. There are many, many questions in that world that is evolving at a very fast pace, and sometimes in directions that we're not quite expecting, that are very important. And I'll tell you the one that is the one that is the most in my mind in terms of those questions. It is the place of young leaders in our country, the place that they will have in the world, the role they'll have to play in the world, the opportunities and challenges that they will face. And of course, when you live in a place like McGill, are we doing what we need to do to prepare those young leaders for the place and the role they'll have to play in the world? Let me just put in front of you a few of my hypotheses. I call them hypotheses because I don't have a proof that I will be right. But I would say that young leaders in our universities today are likely to live past 100-year-old. Chances are that they'll have a longer working life that we have. Chances are, of course, that they will have several careers and several jobs. And also, there's quite a high probability that they will live and work in different countries. They will have, we already see the increased mobility. And this, to me, is an important, very, very important question for our country. Certainly, it is that, are we doing what we need to do to make sure that these young leaders are well prepared for the role that they will have to play? And I'll add one more thing, and this is not a hypothesis, this is something we know. I call it the demographic weight on their shoulders. Because, of course, we're seeing the switch now in terms of demography, more older people than younger people, which means that these young people will have to be innovative, they'll have to be productive, and also they'll have to be very resilient. So this is very much in my mind, and I think you will talk about some of these topics during the conference. You know, I mentioned mobility, and we often think about mobility in terms of the opportunities that people, particularly people of talent, have to do what they like to do anywhere in the world. But I think we all also know about the other side of this picture, and that is people who have to leave their own country for reasons that are dramatic, and all of the issues surrounding global migrations, which is a topic that will also be discussed here. And in this country, we've learned a lot, I think, from people who chose to come to Canada to restart their life in our country. And I hope that we can put that to good use as we welcome people from other parts of the world. So these are some of the interesting questions that will be discussed this year. It's always exciting to be a part of this discussion. Et comme vous le savez, il y a des gens qui viennent d'un peu partout, qui sont ici pour en discuter, des représentants du gouvernement, des journalistes, des experts, des gens qui sont en formation, donc des étudiants, des activistes. Alors, c'est un beau terrain là, très fertile pour discuter de ces questions-là. Alors, je nous souhaite une très bonne conférence. I think we will come out of here with many new thoughts and new thoughts on how we individually and also how our country can play a role in that world. Et maintenant, ça me fait très plaisir de demander à Madame Anne Dadson de prendre la parole. As many of you know, Anne is the co-chair of the MISC board, and I would like to ask her to come and say a few words. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame Fortier. As always, our principal has set out lots of questions, lots of ideas, lots of things for us to think about as we go into this conference. And I, like everybody else in the room, Suzanne, is grateful for that, so thank you. Bonjour à tout le monde. On behalf of the board of the Institute, I'm delighted to welcome you to our 2016 conference. Professor Straw, as always, he and his colleagues have identified a theme that's both timely and important. And I, like the rest of you, look forward to the debates that will follow over the course of the next couple of days and the questions that these discussions will provoke. This afternoon, I'm especially pleased to welcome our two keynote speakers. Firstly, the Honorable Tony Clement, who will be speaking about the conservative view on foreign policy. And secondly, Leanne Simpson, currently visiting scholar in Indigenous Studies at the Institute. And her presentation is entitled Decolonial Love, Centering Resurgent Indigenous Nationhood. So we have a lively afternoon ahead, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I plan to. Thank you very much for coming. Will, à vous, to introduce our first panel.